Humans are weird racing circuit. Is anybody going to investigate the noises coming from the disused supply bay? Base Commander 4 Trills asked of the office at large. Not willingly, Tick's Key replied after a far longer pause than Trisk fastidiousness required. And the fact that you haven't gone to investigate it yourself suggests you know exactly why. The Trisk made a point of turning his body away and began to groom his optical sensory hairs with his hindmost pair of legs. Commander 4 Trills rubbed his wing hooks over his sensory horns in sympathy. This did have to be dealt with. He chirped in his most authoritative tone. Every sentient in the room turned their attention to the human sitting at a data console, typing energetically away at a report. The seconds dragged out while they waited for the normally observant human to notice their attention. Finally, 4 Trills sighed and flew over to the man. "Ranger Frank," he said, coming to rest on the human's head cover. The human reached up and idly patted the base commander. "Do you hear the noise in the supply bay?" 4 Trills asked. "You can't prove that I do, Commander," Ranger Frank said cheerfully without taking his eyes off of the screen in front of him. "Do you plan on investigating it?" 4 Trills asked. "Investigate what?" the human replied without changing tone. 4 Trills sighed and fluttered out of the room. It was a matter of moments to reach the disused supply bay, and he set his teeth grimly before flying through the upper door. A small cluster of humans surrounded one of the old water barrels that was sitting on end in the corner of the room under a window. 4 Trills decided against announcing himself. He wasn't the type of commander to sneak around, but he genuinely doubted he could make the humans hear him over the sound of the humans yelling and stomping. One human, a junior Ranger Smith he believed, reached over and began to pound his fist onto the scapula region of the human beside him, one Junior Ranger Ford. 4 Trills perched a moment on a support beam and rubbed his aching sensory horns. While any reasonable species would consider the crushing blows an assault, he was under the impression that the 2 youngest humans were close friends, and Ford didn't seem to be reacting to the blows that were moving his body several wing widths with every strike. 4 Trill gathered himself and darted over to circle over the humans' heads. He stared down into the barrel. The first filtration level had been removed, revealing the second filtration level. This left a depth of about a human's handspan. In that space, 5 concentric arcs of a sucrose substance the humans enjoyed as a treat had been laid. The arcs were nearly complete circles, but only the inner one was closed, making all arcs the same length. 5 specimens of the newly discovered insectoid species were placed, each on one of the lines. 4 Trills stared down at the sight in confusion. Slowly he realized that the insectoids were not still. They were feeding on the sucrose substance. He flinched as he realized what the portions of the arcs behind them must be comprised of. The absurdity of the situation settled on his back like a rock, and he decided to dismiss speculation. "Ranger Grimes," he chirped out. He deliberately allowed his voice to raise into a range he knew would cause the humans some discomfort. It was the only way to be heard above the din of 12 lungs, each the volume of a family-sized tent. The humans jumped and looked up at where he was hovering. "It's legal," yelped one human. "Checked every regulation," insisted another. "We're not hurting them," piped up a third. "What are you doing to them?" 4 Trills demanded, deciding to go straight to the point. "Racing them," Ranger Grimes said cheerfully. 4 Trills stared down at the uplifted faces and then slowly came to rest on Ranger Grimes' hat. The humans watched him with a hush so intense he could hear the slow grinding of the insectoid's mandibles on the sucrose granules. "How?" he finally asked. "Could that movement be considered a race?" "We see whose brick beetle gets to the end first," Grimes explained. 4 Trills rubbed his sensory horns as he tried to make sense of that. "Are we in trouble?" one human finally asked. 4 Trills sighed and took to the air. "Please be more quiet," he requested. "The rest of the base is trying to work." "Humans are weird North Face." "What is so interesting about that rock face?" 16th Cousin asked as she came upon the base morale officer. Quetzalcoatl shook himself and stretched each of his 8 limbs slowly in the morning sun. 16th Cousin eased back into a comfortable position, letting her hind legs take most of her weight. The tall fence that surrounded the base provided more than enough shade to protect from the weak yellow suns the planet boasted. All attempts to cultivate native flora in the enclosed grounds had been failures, leaving only a few scraggly shrubs protecting mangy patches of ground cover. It was no wonder the cheerful Trisk wanted to look elsewhere. "Human friend Gregor's newest recreational interest," Quetzalcoatl informed her finally. 16th cousin knew very well that she shouldn't respond immediately, as would be polite back home in the gardens. But it was hard to seemingly ignore a polite answer. She satisfied herself with a brief flick of her neck frill and examined the rock face closer. "Is this a matter of projected lights or applied paints?" she finally asked. HFY began to reposition the view screen on his rangefinder and then adjust the screen display so she could see it. "Neither," he observed. "Rather, he is there himself." "He is where?" 16th cousin asked. The Trisk settled back on his motile legs and expanded the screen for her. "There," HFY finally said. He pointed simultaneously to the rock face that was clicks away in the display screen. 16th cousin suddenly felt her frill prickle with unease, the same way it did when her, admittedly spoiled, fourth brother was plotting to escape first father's garden. She wasn't sure what she was looking at first. There was human friend Gregor, first engineer on the base, and it appeared he was climbing a rock face. 16th cousin suddenly leapt back with a hiss. She snapped her head side to side, trying to judge the distance from the base to the rock face, trying to understand. "Is first engineer climbing the rock face?" she demanded. "He is," HFY replied after an unbearable pause. "What safety gear does he have?" 16th cousin demanded, searching her mind for anything that had been checked out. "A bag of dust and his 2 strong arms," HFY replied. 16th cousin stared at him in utter horror, her head cocked so far to the side the broad triangle was near parallel with her abdomen. "Did you even try to stop him?" she finally demanded. "It is a registered human recreation," he defended himself. "They call it free climbing." Humans are weird, one more slice. "And so that's why Thanksgiving Day is different on every colony world," human friend Peter explained, "but is synchronized with the Earth holiday when celebrated in non-aligned spacecraft and on non-colony worlds," Quilsich finished. "Thank you for explaining. Not at all quick," human friend Peter said. "Teaching people about holidays is part of the fun of holidays." Quilsich clicked in understanding as he shifted from one of the human's shoulders to the other. The human was bent over a simmering pot of what they called mush. This particular mush was being reduced to make the filling for a human pastry. The heat and mass required for this process meant that Quilsich needed to maintain a fairly large, safe distance. Fortunately, human friend Peter was more than willing to provide that distance. "Hey," human friend Peter said as he turned off the heat under the mush. "This needs to cool now, and don't you have that meeting soon?" "Yes," Quilsich said regretfully. "I must go. I do desire to stay and watch you finish the process." "I'll record it, little bud," human friend Peter said as he held his hand out for Quilsich to climb down. "Thank you, human friend Peter," Quilsich said. "I will see you at the celebratory meal." The rest of the day passed fairly swiftly. The meal was to begin just as the sun went down, but when he arrived, the humans were already munching on small snacks scattered around the room. The meal itself began rather later than sundown. The humans ate happily for a couple of hours, and then one at a time slumped back in their chairs with an announcement of their satiation. Human friend Peter lasted the longest before he too slumped back and sighed. "I couldn't eat another bite," he said with a sigh. A murmur of agreement spread around the table. "Pity," Quilsich observed as he sipped his eggnog. "How so?" Peter asked, lazily opening one eye to peer at Quilsich. "It seems a shame not to eat the pastry while it is still fresh," Quilsich observed. "Pastry," one of the other humans squinted at Quilsich. "The pumpkin pie," Quilsich stated. "Pie?" The word spread through the humans like a stimulant. As each repeated it, his spine pulled his body straight and his eyes widened in anticipation. "Pie!" human friend Peter confirmed. "Should I go get them?" "Go!" the rest of the humans agreed. Human friend. Peter shoved himself to his feet and strolled over to the refrigeration unit. "Pie," the humans murmured happily. Quilsich clicked curiously but didn't ask the question on his mind. He was pretty full himself, but the pie did smell good. Humans are weird braid. "Have you observed the new human yet?" Flipsalong demanded as she rounded the corner of the flowway. "Nice to brush against you too," Twistunder replied. Flipsalong gave a full-body shimmy of embarrassment and made a show of trying to droop her gripping appendages in apology. "No," Twistunder finally said, taking pity on the eager young university student. "I have not seen our new guest yet. She has extra appendages," Flipsalong declared. "The ambassador is deformed?" Twistunder asked in shock. I don't think so, Flipsalong said. It is a perfectly healthy-looking appendage, or it might be 3 held in a twine for transport. I'm not sure. Some dim memory of a conversation with one of his ranger friends bubbled up in Twistunder's awareness. And where on her body is this extra appendage? He asked. It comes of the back of her. Flipsalong paused and trembled as she visibly tried to think of the term. You know, the primary sensory end. With the organs. Ah! Twistunder nodded as it started to loosen in his thoughts. Off the back of her head. And is the detached end constrained by a cloth band? Yes! Flipsalong declared. Do you know what the appendage is? I am not sure it is an appendage exactly, Twistunder said slowly. Oh, Flipsalong drooped in disappointment. Just an ornamental attachment, then? No, Twistunder said. You probe, you have only touched rangers and university professors yet, I assume? That is correct, Flipsalong said. How does that connect? Rangers, Twistunder said, follow a strict policy of grooming, as do most researchers who will have to expect to be in an environmental suit. They keep their mammalian fur at a regulation length that will not interfere with the fit of an airtight helmet. That is well known, Flipsalong agreed, but how does it connect? Human fur has no standard growth length, Twistunder explained. It continues to lengthen until it reaches each individual's genetic maximum. That is why humans are so strict about their length regulations. Wait! Flipsalong raised a gripping appendage in shock. You meant that massive appendage is just a compressed mass of sensory tendrils? It isn't painful, I assure you, Twistunder said, reading the horror in the set of her appendages. Human fur has no live nerves once past the membrane. So it serves no sensory purpose? Flipsalong asked. A very limited one at best, Twistunder said. Does it offer greater radiation or thermal regulation than the standard ranger length? Flipsalong asked. I do not believe so, Twistunder replied. Flipsalong curled into what the humans called a thinking loaf and pondered this. Then why would a human maintain such a mass of useless tendrils? Flipsalong demanded. Perhaps we should ask the ambassador, Twistunder offered. Though you might want to rephrase that question in the interest of diplomacy.